Hello, my friends. It's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Big picture stuff to start with here. We're working on the book of Nehemiah. On this podcast, for those of you who are new, welcome, by the way. We pick a book of the Bible and we work through it. But that doesn't mean we stay in that book. We use that book like a regional airport to quickly zip all over the place to other interesting places. And then we do that to fill out the backstory and try to understand more about the whole big picture of the Bible. So we've been in Nehemiah. That's the idea of this season. But we also spent a lot of time in Ezra, the book that comes before it and leads right up to it. And we've also bounced around back to Genesis, Exodus, and Deuteronomy, and we've been in Chronicles for the last few days. So if you're just onboarding here in the last week or two and you're like, whoa, it's about Nehemiah, but we're all over the place. Yeah, that's kind of normal. From time to time we do that. And then at other times we'll really drill down on Nehemiah or whatever book we're working on. We'll really chip away at that. And we can get away with it because it's just me and you and we're hanging out. And what else do we have to do? Just take a little bit of time every day to make the Bible part of our rhythm, do it in a way that's fun, in a way that hopefully looks at the big picture, and in a way where I don't get to tell you what to do, because my role in this whole thing is to process through the Bible for myself and process it out loud into this microphone with you, and then you do with it whatever you need to do, because all of our processes of faith are different. We're in different places on that. So I, for one, I'm very biased. I love the way it works. If you are just getting into this season, or maybe this is your first day ever listening to this, I understand there's going to be a little bit of an impulse to think, oh man, I got to go all the way back and listen to all of these episodes to catch up. And you might want to do that eventually, but size it up, hang around. There's going to be some stuff that is building on things we've already talked about that might be a little unfamiliar, but there's going to be stuff in every single episode that is for you and is for anybody, even if it's their first time here. Okay, that's the big picture. Now, speaking of compounding on stuff that we've talked about in the past, here's a very little picture thing real quick. Remember in the last episode when I said that I would tell you the next time I lost at tennis? Well, that happened already. I already lost at tennis. I think I still owe you a couple more telling you I lost at tennis. But no, I meant it when I said I lose at tennis a lot, and I found a way to do that again here just now. Well, you'll also recall that the reason we were talking about tennis yesterday is because of my built-in, unavoidable desire for the approval of my dad, who is a great dude, and there's just something irreplaceable about the approval of your father. Even if your heart's been hurt by your father, you still want that approval. And I think the same is even more true when we're talking about the idea of God as Father. Because my dad could theoretically be wrong. He gets things wrong because he's a person. He makes mistakes. God doesn't make mistakes. He's right in all of his judgments. So of course, if you think there is a God who knows everything and is right in all of his judgments, you would want his approval. It would be a really big deal if that God showed up and maybe even broke the laws of time and space to say, hey, you're nailing it. This is great. Keep doing that. And we talked yesterday about a bunch of places in the Bible where we see exactly that happen. I thought of another one that I think is really appropriate for today in Matthew. I didn't look it up. It's Matthew 25. I'm almost positive. I'm not even going to look. I think it's Matthew 25. You get the parable of the talents. There's this master. It's a parable of Jesus. There's this master, and he gives three different dudes a stack of money. And he's like, hey, go invest this. I'll be back later. Do right by me. And two of the three are given very different amounts, but they both get a great return on it. They handle their business well. They invest the way the master would want them to invest. And what is the master, who is representative of God, the Father, and all of this? What does he say to them? He says, well done, good and faithful servant. And the way Jesus presents that in the book of Matthew makes it sound like that's enough of a reward in and of itself. The master, who's right in all of his ways, said, you did a good job. Amazing. But that isn't the only reward. There's more responsibility. The master's like, hey, this is great. Here's more. Go build more of my estate. Go build more of my kingdom. This is wonderful. And really, that pattern holds through the whole Bible. When God shows up and gives that approval and says, this character right here in this time, yeah, right on. That's what I wanted. Good job. What comes with that is not, and now I think we're finished here. Just let's cruise control. Set that at 61 miles per hour. You shouldn't get pulled over. You have local plates, and we're just going to call it good. No, there's always more responsibility that comes with it. Abraham didn't do much, Abram at the time, early on in the book of Genesis, to have God's approval upon him. But he did do one thing. He believed God. And the Bible says it was credited to him as righteousness. And what did God do? He made a covenant with him. Here's all these things you're gonna get, that are gonna happen. Oh, and also, there's a responsibility that you and your descendants have, and it is to be a blessing to all the nations. We see that kind of, hey, I'm God and here's my approval, and also here's more responsibility thing happen throughout the Old Testament. And that's also the case in 2 Chronicles, where we've been hanging out for the last few days, looking at the stuff around the building and the dedication of the temple that was all carried out by the great King Solomon about 500 and change years before the book of Nehemiah that this whole season big picture is about. And what we're seeing in 2 Chronicles is that God breaks the laws of time and space to say, great job on the temple. Great job on these sacrifices. Love the direction we're heading in. Yes, I approve of all of this. I'm breaking the laws of time and space to show you that I approve of all of this. And there's more ahead. Solomon isn't just going to get the one round of approval from God. He's going to get a specific visit from God and specific approval from God in this way. It's recorded in 2 Chronicles 12. The Lord appeared to Solomon at night and said, I've heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a temple for sacrifices. When I shut up the heavens so there's no rain, or command locusts to devour the land, or send a plague among my people, which he talks about more specifically in the work of the prophet Joel, another book of the Old Testament. But he goes on to say, if those circumstances happen, those bad things happen, he goes on to say, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayers offered in this place. That right there is probably the most famous articulation of that promise from God in the whole Old Testament. Because remember, a few days ago, we saw that God basically said the same thing to Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 30 with very similar language. He used language about having his eyes be open and his ears be open and restoring them, even if stuff is ruined and wrecked and they're living a long ways off. He basically says, if your hearts are contrite and they turn back to me, I'll bring you back to your land. I'll restore what was broken per the promise of blessings and curses according to your obedience or disobedience that are a part of this covenant that we're making right here. So God said the same thing to Moses 400 and change years before the stuff we're reading about here in 2 Chronicles. And now God is very explicitly telling Solomon, hey, the deal is still on. Times are great right now. I consumed your sacrifices with fires from heaven, and the physical manifestation of my presence has occupied the temple. I'm in. But he seems to anticipate that in the future, things might not be so great. And he even takes responsibility for it himself. Like, if I send no rain, if I send these locusts, it's not like it just might sneak up on God and surprise him. He's like, hey, if these kind of curses or punishments should come, he's saying it doesn't mean it's over. That's just when you need to invoke the, hey, pull it together clause and humble yourselves and pray and seek my face and turn from your wicked ways. If you do all of that, I'm going to heal the land, and my eyes will be open and my ears will be attentive. And then God goes on to sort of re-up the covenant with Moses and the covenant with David. He does so in sort of new terms with Solomon here in 2 Chronicles 7. Maybe you could call this the Solomonic covenant. And it's very conditional, and it follows the same dance steps as the deal God made with Moses. I'm going to be your God. You're going to be my people. If you obey me, I'm going to bless you, and everybody will know that I'm your God and you're my people. If you disobey me, I'm going to punish you, and everybody will still know that I'm your God and you're my people. Verse 17 of 2 Chronicles 7. This is still God hanging out with Solomon and talking to him. He says, as for you, if you walk before me as David your father did and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws, I'll establish your royal throne, as I covenanted with David your father when I said, you shall never fail to have a man to rule over Israel. But if you turn away and forsake the decrees and commands I've given you and go off and serve other gods and worship them, then I will uproot Israel from my land, which I have given them, and I will reject the temple I have consecrated for my name. I'll make it a byword and an object of ridicule among all peoples. And though this temple is now so imposing, all who pass by will be appalled and say, why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple? People will answer, the outsiders will answer, because they, the Jewish people, have forsaken the Lord, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. That is why he brought all this disaster on them. Generally speaking, I still think this is a really positive visit from God to say you're on the right track, but it also comes with a warning. Hey, your ancestors were on the right track too, and then they deviated from that. Know that there was a clause for them as there is a clause for you should you and your descendants get it wrong, to turn back to me and for me to put things back together. But just in case there's any vagary here, this is the deal. And if you violate my covenant, it isn't just that you will suffer punishment. You will lose this temple. This temple will be destroyed. You will lose your custody of this place. And then, of course, that is what happens just a few hundred years after this interaction between God and Solomon, when the Babylonians show up in 586 BC and destroy that temple and take it away. And Ezekiel, the prophet, has a vision around that time of the presence of God getting up and leaving the temple. All of this, my friends, hangs together. If it's a little overwhelming, that's okay. We will gradually absorb this story together. We will gradually feel the beats of this story together. But when we're looking at what Nehemiah is praying in Nehemiah 1, we have to understand that he's not absorbing this stuff. He's soaked. He's saturated in this story. He feels this story. He lives this story. It's in his blood. And his prayer, which we'll get back to tomorrow, is such a precise reflection of that reality of him being a part, having ownership, living in this story that you and I have spent the last few days thinking about. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.